such a long time, and I apologise for that. So this is going to be just a big update, everything that's happened in the pregnancy so far. Currently 34 weeks pregnant. The last video I did was a 7-week update. Turns out I was only 5 weeks, so I'm just going to talk about what's happened with the pregnancy between 5 weeks and now. So like I said, last video I was only 5 weeks pregnant. I found that out because although I'd been to see the nurse practitioner and she dated me as 6 weeks and then filmed a 7-week update, I actually had to have a scan. I had to have an early pregnancy scan because I had a bleed and they thought that I was miscarrying the baby. Turns out the baby was fine, the heartbeat was there, we went and got checked out, everything was okay, but I wasn't as far along as I thought. I was 2 weeks behind. The last video you saw, I was technically 5 weeks. So this all happened round about what I thought was 9 weeks pregnant, but I was 7 weeks pregnant. So you kind of get the gist of how I was 2 weeks behind, basically. Ovulated late, dates were wrong. So I'm going to break this down into 3 sections. I'm going to do the first trimester, second trimester, and then kind of where I am now in the third trimester. Just because this video would be really long if I just talked right the way through every single week. So the first trimester was pretty bad for me. I suffered with severe morning sickness. I had 2 hospital admissions for dehydration in that time as well. And I was diagnosed with hyperemesis, which is basically, it's morning sickness to the extreme basically, but it has something to do with how much weight you lose in such a short space of time. So in the space of 3 weeks, so I'd say between 8 weeks to 11 weeks, I lost nearly 2 stone. So in the space of 3 weeks, I lost 2 stone. So my weight dropped drastically. I was also suffering with dehydration. I couldn't keep water down. I certainly couldn't keep food down. Led to me losing nearly 2 stone in such a short space of time. So they were quite worried about the dehydration. So I actually was admitted, just before I had the early scan, I was admitted to A&E. I went straight to A&E because I was dizzy, headaches, and had this bleed. And I'd rang the delivery ward and they basically just said, go straight to A&E, you need to be seen straight away. So rushed into, it wasn't like a high dependency unit, but it was, I was basically rushed through A&E ahead of everybody else to get put onto fluids. So I had a drip in my arm, had an intravenous drip. I was there for about, I'd say about 4 or 5 hours. I can't really remember now, it was that long ago. But I was there for about 4 or 5 hours, had a good couple of bags of fluid, had some anti-sickness drugs through the drip, like intravenously, and they sent me on my way after that. Because I didn't, they had to check whether I was keeping food down. So I'd had a couple of biscuits whilst I was there and sips of water and things. So they were happy enough to let me go home. I was then prescribed 2 different kinds of tablets, anti-somatics, or sometics is what they're called. I had another hospital admission at 12 weeks, and I think I was 12 weeks and like two or 3 days, and that was just before Christmas. So that was the Monday before Christmas, and I actually had to stay in overnight for that one. They ran some tests and was testing my urine because my urine had quite a lot of bilirubin in, which I didn't know what this was until before this happened. But it basically means when your urine is quite concentrated and it's quite a dark yellow or dark orange colour, it's called you've got bilirubin present in your urine and protein. So they tested me for all of that. They did tons and tons and tons of blood tests to make sure I was okay really and that the baby was okay. They all came back okay, other than they were quite concerned about my liver. Apparently the test that they'd done measured the levels of something in my liver, or the function of my liver, and it should be around about 40. Mine was 227, so it was, pretty bad. So they tested me again throughout my stay in hospital. They did like regular intervals of tests, and they could see a pattern that it was coming down the more and more fluids I was getting. So they were happy enough to let me go home the next day. So that sums up the first trimester basically. I was very, very sick, was diagnosed with hyperemesis, was on all sorts of various different medications to help with the sickness, and to help me gain weight, or to help the baby gain weight, because they were pretty concerned at this point if I was losing a lot of weight and not being able to keep myself hydrated, obviously it could lead to more serious things. So the second trimester I did start to improve a little bit. I would say I had the sickness right the way up until I was about 18 weeks, 17, 18 weeks. Around about 18 weeks I started to level out. Everything became a little bit easier to manage. I was starting to enjoy the pregnancy because I wasn't as sick as much. I was able to go back to work. I wasn't having any days off. Besides feeling tired, I would say that the second trimester was okay. We had the Down syndrome test that they do at around, I think that was, I can't even remember when that was. I can't remember when the Down syndrome test was, but that basically had that blood test. That all came back fine. We were low risk for Down syndrome, so there's no further tests required. We did the glucose test, which all came back fine. No traces of diabetes or anything like that, which I was quite concerned about actually, because my granddad, before he passed away, and for the latter part of his life, he did have diabetes, so I was quite concerned that was going to come back, that I had gestational diabetes. But touch wood, everything is okay at the moment. We found out the gender, of course, and we'd kind of said from the beginning that we always wanted to know what we were going to have. We decided to find out the gender, and yes, we're having a little boy, so we have a name picked out and everything ready to go for him. I forgot to mention as well, in amongst everything else, we also moved house. So that's why I'm sitting in a different background. I'm currently in, this is our bedroom, and if you can see the stairs just up there, that leads up to the baby's room. Third trimester, which is what I'm in at the moment. As I said, currently 34 weeks pregnant. So far so good, although I am quite tired, because obviously it's getting to that point where it's getting more difficult to do things, not sleeping very well, constantly up and down in the night to go to the bathroom. I've had quite a lot of like hip pain, and I think they call it round ligament pain, which I've actually only just learnt today. I just thought I was just having cramps, but I think I've been having round ligament pain by the sounds of it, by the way that they describe round ligament pain to what I've been feeling. I do think that's what it is. I have had another hospital visit this trimester at 30 weeks, so just over a month ago. I had gone down to visit my family, and I was away for 5 days, 3 days. By 3 days it was just me, and then Johnny, my partner, was going to come down on the weekend to spend the last couple of days, and we were going to come back together. So I got the train down on the Wednesday, everything was fine, went out shopping with my mum and my sister to get everything we needed for the baby. So I went out, had a good day, went shopping, had a bit of lunch, did quite a lot that day. That was the Thursday. Friday comes around, and I can't really remember what we've been doing during the day, but it came to about 10:30 at night, and I had horrendous cramp in my ribs. Like I had like shooting pains round in my ribs. The pain then, in the space of half an hour, the pain had moved round to the front, and it was going round, like shooting into my ribs at the front and across the top of my uterus. And then I panicked, because the pain was getting more and more severe. It was getting to the point where I couldn't talk through the pain. So I went into my mum's room and I woke her up, and I said, I don't feel right, something doesn't feel good, something's happening. So she went into panic mode, and we rang the hospital, and in the meantime I'd started throwing up as well. So we rang the hospital down there, and they basically said you just need to come into triage in the maternity ward. So we went straight to triage. I had stupidly forgotten my maternity notes, which is not good at all, and yes, I've learned and I've had the lecture from the midwives. I know I should take them everywhere, and I do now, but at the time I didn't. So had the lecture off the midwives. They popped me on the monitors, so they monitored my uterus. I had a monitor on my uterus and a monitor on the baby, and his heart rate was fine. They monitored me for about 3 hours. His heart rate was absolutely perfect, but I was having contractions. They basically were quite concerned that I was having these tightenings or these contractions of my uterus so early on, obviously at 30 weeks. So they got one of the doctors to come round, who was a lovely lady. She came round and basically talked through what potentially could happen, which was preterm labour. So they did an examination, and they basically wanted to check that my cervix wasn't dilating, that it was still long and closed, which it was, thank God. And they did a swab, and they basically took this swab and dipped it in some fluid. I don't know what the fluid was, and then dipped it was basically like a strip pregnancy test. It obviously wasn't a pregnancy test, but it was the same kind of thing. Dipped it in, and that detected a hormone of whether or not I was going to go into preterm labour within the next 7 days. Now, I'd never heard of anything like this before because I've never had a baby before, but apparently this is, you know, a lot of people have had this test done. So that thankfully came back negative. So they were happy enough to let me go home. They basically just put it down to the fact that I'd maybe eaten something that didn't agree with me during the day, or that I'd just eaten too much, and that my uterus was pushing against my stomach, made me sick, irritated uterus because of vomiting. So that was all, you know, all was all fine. I just took it very easy for the next 2 days whilst I was down there, down at my mum's. My partner drove down like 3 o'clock in the morning, so we just kind of took it easy, made sure that I had plenty of rest, drank plenty of water, put my feet up, that sort of thing. And then that kind of pretty much leads us to today. I know it's been such a long time since I've done a video, and I do apologise. I wish I could have done weekly videos and weekly updates so I had something to go back on, but it just has not been easy. It's been a really tough pregnancy, and in and out of hospital, and I was so ill and I didn't have no energy to do anything. So anyway, feeling better now, and I'm feeling so excited to meet this little man, and only, well, 5 weeks and a few days to go. Touch wood that he doesn't pop out early, but yeah, so that's kind of just a general pregnancy update, and kind of just everything that's been happening over the past God knows how many weeks. I'll be back with a 34-week pregnancy update, and in that video I'm going to talk about what happened at the midwife, you know, all the midwife information, size and weight and that sort of thing about the baby. So yeah, don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, because I am going to put out a few more videos before this baby comes along. So it would be nice if you would subscribe and maybe leave a friendly comment below. So I'll talk to you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.